We're very thankful to have another opportunity to look into God's Word. We appreciate the church at Friendship for providing this opportunity, allowing this opportunity, supporting it through their prayers. We're thankful for each one that listens and watches these recordings, and we hope and pray that it's a blessing to you. Not that I am trying to be anything. The Lord, if there's a blessing to be gotten out of it, it'll be because of the Lord, not because of me. But we thank you for your prayers, and we ask you for your continued prayers. And as I say each time, not just for myself, but every God-called preacher out there, I know that they all need your prayers. We're going to look in the book of Genesis in the 2nd chapter, starting at verse 1 for a reading lesson. And it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended His work which He had made, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work which He had made. And God blessed the 7th day, and He sanctified it, because that in it He rested from all His work which God created and made." Now, those 3 verses of Scripture there will be a short reading lesson for your hearing. And as you can look and find that here, that on this 7th day He rested, because He got a lot done in those first 6 days. He created the heavens and the earth, separated the seas from the land, created every living thing, all the animals that are. And then He created man out of the dust of the ground and made breathing His life, His nostrils, the breath of life, that he would be a living soul. Even had given them a law there to not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Had made him a wife, a helpmeet, taking a rib from his flesh to be able to be a helpmeet to him, a companion to him. And after all that He had done, and you could look and you could see that the Scriptures would say that God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. Everything that God did, it was perfect. Everything that God did had no sin about it. Everything that God did was done through the mighty power that dwells within Him. And I don't believe that it was, in fact, I know that it wasn't just God the Father there. It was God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Ghost, all present, working together in unity and in power to create all things that have been made. And we look and we find here in these Scriptures that He had created all things, the heaven and the earth and all that was in them. And it says that on this 7th day that He had ended all His work. And it says here that He rested on this 7th day from all that He had made. And He blessed the 7th day and He sanctified it. So He worked and He labored and He created all these things. But on this 7th day that came around, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, they rested from their labors. They took the time on this 7th day. In fact, He says here that He blessed the 7th day and He sanctified it. He set it apart from all the other days, that He took time to rest. We want you to look in the Scriptures over in the book of Exodus in the 20th chapter. Here as Moses had went up there on the mount to be with God, and he began to tell him and giving him the 10 commandments, and God by His own finger wrote them in that stone. You hear that old saying that it's not wrote in stone, meaning that it's still changeable. Well, I'm going to tell you what, that comes from the Holy Word of God, where God wrote it in stone. And when He wrote it in stone, it was unchangeable. This was the moral law. This was the law which everything hung on. And we look and we find here that in this law that it says, but on the 7th day, and this is in Exodus 20 and verse 10, but the 7th day, let's back up 2 there. It says in verse 8, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." Now this Sabbath day, this day that was set aside, was that same 7th day that the Lord set aside and rested. And here we find that He brings it again into their attention and puts it in the form of a commandment, not a request, not you can do this if you want to, but a commandment, something that he expected his children to abide by. He said, remember, keep this day, this Sabbath day, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, to keep it pure, just as God had done. We find here that it says, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord, and in it thou shalt do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. So we look here and find that he references back to the reading lesson there in Genesis of where he rested on that 7th day. And he tells mankind, he tells the people of Israel, that little Hebrew nation, his chosen people, he says, you're going to work 6 days. You're going to toil and you're going to labor. But on that 7th day, you're to rest. So he goes on and he clarifies. He leaves no room for doubt. He says, on the 7th day, the Sabbath unto the Lord, thou shalt not do any work. Not some work, but any work. He says, thou nor thy son. So you can't just send your boys out or your children out. Thy daughter or thy manservant, thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within the gates. Here he is telling them that he is encompassing everyone, that it applies to everybody. And you might listen to me and you might discard my words. You might say, well, I don't believe like the Missionary Baptists. You may not, but I'm going to tell you the Word of God is the Word of God unto all mankind. And I want you to see what the Lord said about it in the long ago is that we're to keep the Sabbath holy, that we're to separate ourselves, rest from our labors on that one day a week. We find according to the Scriptures. You bear with us here for just a little while. Over the book of Nehemiah in the 13th chapter, we find here in verse 15, it says, in those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and lading asses, also wine and grapes and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. So here I find that what he began to observe among the children of Israel is that it didn't take them long. I'm sure for a while that they were very careful. They were probably very afraid to stray at all from the Word of God, to stray away from the orders that he had given. But in time, much like we are today, we begin to inch little by little by little away from the center line, away a little at a time. We don't take big jumps. We take little bitty inches, just a little bit at a time. Just a little bit at a time, and then the next thing you know, we're a mile away from where we need to be. And here we find that Nehemiah began to look, and he said he began to see them treading the wine presses, making wine, getting that ready. And he said that he saw this on the Sabbath day, the day that the Lord had explicitly told them not to do any work of any kind. And it goes on and says, and they were bringing in sheaves. Well, they was out in the fields and the wheat. They were bringing in sheaves. Says that they were bringing also in the wine and grapes and figs and all manner of burdens. They were doing everyday common labor things and things that I'm sure needed to get done. But they were doing it on the day the Lord said, do no work. They were doing it on the day, and I know what you're thinking, but you don't know how busy I am. You don't know all that's got to get done, and 6 days ain't enough. God made everything in 6 days, and He rested on the 7th day, and He expects the same from you and I, that we are no different than what they were then. The expectation has not changed. It doesn't matter. Maybe we've got too much going on. Maybe we're laying out too much for ourselves that we can't find the time to rest on the Lord's day. We go on and find also in the book of Nehemiah in the 10th chapter in verse 31, it says, and if the people of the land bring ware or any victuals, any food, on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. So here we find that he says, now if there's people that bring, it says here, any wares, any items, or any food to sell on the Sabbath or holy day, we're not to buy it. I'm just going to tell you, we're all guilty of it. We don't need to be going out and eating all these places on Sunday. We don't need to be going and sitting down in these restaurants and eating on Sunday. We don't need to be driving through the drive-thrus on Sunday. We need to prepare what God would feed us with. And I'm going to tell you, if you've got something to eat, the Lord is the one that has truly provided it. And we need to get all that together on the day before Sunday. On a Saturday, we need to get our things together so that we have food prepared for us for the next day. And we're all guilty of it. You might say, yeah, but I'm not doing anything. You're causing other people to go work. And the same could be said of going to Walmart. It could be said of going to shop at anything of recreation. I'm going to tell you what, the Lord's Day should be the Lord's Day. And you might say, why do you call it the Lord's Day? Because I find over here in the book of Revelation, in the 1st chapter, here as John was cast out on the Isle of Patmos for the word of the Lord and the testimony, he says in verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, and heard behind him a great voice as the sound of a trumpet. Now the Sabbath day was what we would call Saturday. All right, that is the 7th day of the week. Sunday is the first day of the week. We find here in the scriptures in the book of Mark in the 16th chapter that the Lord rose on the first day of the week. What is mentioned there in those scriptures, there is the first day of the week, and the Lord's Day, I believe, to refer to the same thing, and we are to observe that day, the Lord's Day, with the holiness and the rest that God expects us to. He doesn't expect us to treat that like any other day. He doesn't expect us to go out mowing the yard on Sunday. Now, Sunday's not a weekend day. Some people look at it as weekend day. It's first day of the week. That's the day the Lord rose. I'm going to tell you what a glorious day. What a glorious day to be able to come together knowing that it was on the first day of the week that the Lord come out of that grave, rose by His power. But yet, we mow on Sunday. I'm going to tell you what, if you ain't got it done 6 days a week, I wouldn't be out there mowing it on Saturday, on a Sunday, I mean. Get out and wash your car. I don't believe the Lord wants us washing our cars on Sunday. He don't want us changing our oil. He don't want us mopping the floors. He don't want us cleaning the house. He doesn't want us doing all those things on His day or causing others to have to do them for us. I'm going to tell you what, He wants us to rest on the Lord's day. And I'm going to tell you what, we have done a poor job as members of the church and true and living God of setting that example for those in our community, for our children and our grandchildren. We've all done a poor job of letting them know that Sunday is the Lord's Day and that we're not to treat it like any other day. It's not the day the Lord has set aside for you to go to the lake. It's not that day. It's just not that day. It's not the day that's been set aside for you to miss and get a head start on a week of vacation. No, that's not what the Lord set that aside for. He set it aside as a holy day, a day to be separated from all the other days, a day to be respected and reverenced. You know, we might need to think a little bit, take a little inventory of me as well. on how we treat the Lord's Day. How we treat that day that He wants us to set aside and not be like any other day. So, well, if He don't want us to do that, what does He want us to do? I'm going to tell you what I believe He wants us to do on the Lord's Day. I find in the Scriptures that while the Lord was still here in this world and walking, before He rose again there on the first day of the week, I find that on the Sabbath day in Luke 14 and 16, says, and He came to Nazareth where He had been brought up, and as His custom was, He went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. I look and I find that the Lord Jesus Himself, on the day that had been set aside as a holy day, a day of rest, sanctified unto God, that where did He go on that day? He went up, it says here, to the synagogue, where the place that had been set aside for the worship of God. And there's going to be people that are going to tell me, well, I can worship God anywhere. Well, you can. I believe we need to worship God at home. I believe there needs to be some worship in the house. I believe that our children need to see us with our Bibles open, and they need to see us praying, and that we need to tell our children of the goodness of God from the Holy Word, but also how good He's been in our lives. That needs to happen in our homes. You can be off from here and bow down and worship God. You can be from Sunday evening, Sunday night, or Monday, all the way through Saturday, sitting on the beach, looking at the world and looking at the marvelous creation of God and worship Him. But on Sunday morning, we need to be in the Lord's house. We need to be where God expects for us to be, the example that's been set, because this day is not an extra day to do with what we desire. It isn't a day to bond with our family in some worldly sense. It is a day for us and our family to go to the house of God. The Scriptures teach me over in Hebrews in the 10th chapter in verse 25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another so much more as you see the day approaching. Not forsaking. That forsake there, looking that up in the Greek, means to leave behind or to desert. Not deserting the assembling of ourselves together. Who is the ourselves? Is that just talking about any congregation of people? Is that talking about any group? No. I believe he's talking about the Lord's church assembling themselves together. That assembly together that is separate from everything else. I find in the book of Isaiah, as he was talking and prophesying here of the setting up of the church of the true and living God. The kingdom is here right now. It's here in this world today. When He set up His church, His kingdom, it sits and reigns today. It is here in this world. You might be thinking it's a coming someday. I'm going to tell you what. The Lord's church, His kingdom, is alive right now and in working order. And it's sitting right here in Macon County and all over the world. It says here in Isaiah 2:2, it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. I believe that when the Lord came into this world, not only did He come to die for the sins of all mankind, He come to establish His church, His kingdom in this world. And I find, according to the Scriptures in the Gospel, we find there that it says that He went into a mountain to pray, and when He had prayed, He called to whom He would, and of them He chose 12, and He sent them forth. I'm going to tell you who it was. What that He did right there is He sought the help of God, is He organized, set up His church upon Himself, the true foundation. I'm going to tell you what, there ain't a better foundation. There is no other foundation of the Lord's church but Jesus Christ. Anything founded on anything else, it has got an unstable foundation that'll fall away. But the Lord's church will stand. I'm going to tell you what, it'll never, ever go out. But we look here and we find that here as He began to tell of this being going to come, that there was the mountain of the Lord's house be set up in the top of the mountains, that all nations, that all would flow into it. You say, well, everybody hasn't. I'm going to tell you what, there was a time that they did there at the day of Pentecost. All the nations were gathered together
they was able to hear the church of the true and living God, the power come down upon it, and they preached the gospel to every nation. Every nation was able to hear what the Word of God had to say through the power of God through His church. We look and we find in verse 3 it says, and many shall go and say, many. It didn't say all. It didn't say all. It said many. All have the invitation, but all won't ever take it. But it says many people shall go and say, come ye, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob, and He will teach us His ways, and we'll walk in His commandments. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. What is he talking about there? Was he talking about that tabernacle, that building? No, he was not. Did it symbolize and reference to the house of God that would be set up? Yes, it did. It had a reference point to look for something that would be built, not made of hands, not a physical structure, but a spiritual house built up, and that people would say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord's house. Why? He will teach us. I'm going to tell you what, if you want to be taught, you want to be fed, you want to grow, go to the Lord's house. Go to the Lord's house on Sunday morning and hear the preaching of the Word of God. Hear the teaching from the Word of God. Hear the good testimonies, the good songs. Pray, testify, worship. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. You can grow with the house of God. You can grow assembling together. This that you see, this little area that is behind me, representative, this building set here in Macon County for Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. This building, it is not Friendship Church. It is the house in which they have set aside to worship. And I'm going to tell you what, on Sunday mornings, the members ought to be here. They ought to want to be here. They ought to say, the husband ought to say to his wife, come on, to your children, come on, let's get up. Let's go to the Lord's house that He may teach us, that we may learn. And if the husband won't come, then the wife ought to get them children ready and say, come, let us go to the Lord's house that we may learn. And if the mother and father won't, then the grandparents, someone, aunts, uncles, caring people, loving people of the Lord's church ought to grab these children and invite people to come that they might learn. Because the Lord can teach you something. I might be pretty poor at it, and I know that I am, but the Lord is the true teacher. Says here, He will teach us His ways, and we'll walk in them. For out of Zion go forth the law and the word, Lord, from Jerusalem. So we find there that there should be a desire, and that's what you come to the Lord's house to do. If you've come to socialize at the Lord's house, you've come from the wrong reason. The Lord doesn't want us to come to the Lord's house, to come to His church to socialize. It's not what it's for. It's not for a picnic. It ain't for to have a cookout or a concert. It ain't for a hayride. It ain't for fun and games. That is not what going to the Lord's house should be about. We should go to the Lord's house to learn of His ways and to worship Him and to give Him the honor and praise that He so rightly deserves. It doesn't say anything in this book about having fun and games. I'm going to tell you what it does tell me, though. It tells us about worshiping Him. When the church comes together and work in order, humble and praying and depending on the Lord, and the Lord come on the scene, I'm going to tell you what, there ain't a better place to be. I find the scriptures to say, over in Psalms 122:1, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go unto the house of the Lord. I find also in Psalms 84:10, for a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. Here we find the writer having a fond affection for going to the house of God. Wanting to be there. Desiring to be there. Said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. If you look at coming to church on Sunday morning, coming together in the worship of the Lord as a chore, then you need to get down on your knees and get your heart right with God. If you look at this as an inconvenience, I'm going to tell you what, you need to get on your knees and you need to get right with God. If you look at this as, well, people use the excuse, well, y'all think you're better up there. I've never met anybody that thought that they was better. I know I ain't better than nobody. I'm going to tell you what, I've made as many mistakes as anybody I know. I make them. I have to repent, ask the Lord to forgive me of my sins. I realize it. But I'm going to tell you what, you can come up with all the excuses you want. The devil's got plenty of them. He'll give you all the excuses you want not to get up and go to the Lord's house on Sunday morning, where you can learn, you can get closer to God, you can have a better week, you can have a better life, your children can hear the Word of God, they can get saved at the house of God. Yes, sir, they can. How many's been saved on the old mourner's bench just like this, or out in the house somewhere because they showed up on Sunday morning, their mamas and their daddies took them to the Lord's house so they would hear and know. I'm going to tell you what, there's children in this world, they've got everything. Their mamas and daddies giving them everything, carrying them all over the place, playing baseball and softball and volleyball and football, basketball, you name it, on Sunday. I'm going to tell you what, you better cut that out. You better cut that part out. That part right there, it'll last about that long. It'll last about that long. Won't you bring them to the Lord's house when they can find something that'll last them through all eternity. It ain't no out eternity. There ain't no throughout eternity. You don't get out of eternity. I mean, it's through eternity. For all ages, they can find something that they can live with and even be better to die with. Said it, well, I was glad. Are you glad to get to go to the Lord's house? Does it mean something to you? Does it say here, as he said, for a day in thy courts is better than 1,000 somewhere else? He would rather spend time in the Lord's house. I'm going to tell you what, that's exactly where the Lord wants us to be. He wants us to be at His house. He wants us to be among His people. He wants us to serve Him. He wants us to give Him the honor and glory that He so rightly deserves in the Lord's house on Sunday morning. You know, those of you that might be listening might say, well, you know, I don't have a church to go to. There might be people off from here, I don't know who listens to this and who don't, that they ain't got one. I want you to know that there's people that live within 5-10 minutes of churches right around here where I live that won't get up and go to church. Have it. They don't know how good they've got it. Don't know how blessed we are to be able to drive within a 5 to 10, 15 minutes. We can be at the Lord's house. Say, well, if it took you half an hour, that'd be no big deal, but you could get somewhere to hear the Word of God, somewhere to worship with God's people. You might say, I ain't a member nowhere. If you've been saved by the grace of God, you've been saved by the grace of God, God wants you to be a member of His church. That ain't a wondering, that ain't is it an option? He wants you to be. And I advise you to be seeking out the church of the true and living God. Finding out from God where He wants you to be, and then go there and be the very best member that you can be. You won't be without fault, but you'll be just like everybody else that falls short of the glory of God. But how we come together, and when the Spirit comes in on the Lord's day and the power gets a hold of us, how great it is to be in the house of God when men and women weep for joy. Weep for joy. Weep in burden, and then shout the praises of God. There ain't a better place to be. I'm glad I grew up in one. They tell me that that's the first place that they ever took me was to the Lord's house after I was born and brought home. I'm thankful for that. I thank my mother and father for doing that for me and my brothers. But they didn't take me every now and again. They didn't just take me at Christmas and Easter and some during revival. Every Sunday, we was in the Lord's house. The Lord's Day was set aside different than any other day. We didn't work on those days. Growing up, stores wasn't open like what they are now. They wouldn't be open day if we all wouldn't go. It was a different day. My Granny Harrison, she used to fix for us on Sundays quite a bit as we grew up a little more. And I remember one Sunday, we went out there to eat. We was sitting around eating, and Granny was dressed, and you could tell she hadn't been to church. And Daddy said, "Mama, did you go to church today?" She said, "No, Ronnie, I didn't have time to fix anything yesterday, so I'd stay home fix today." He says, "We won't come back if you ain't going to go to church." I said, "We won't be back to eat if you don't go to church first." It sent a message to me and my brothers sitting around that table that he'd rather ate a bologna sandwich at the house than to have had his own mama fix what was a wonderful meal to eat, always was. He would rather have seen her eat, had sit there with a bologna sandwich, and her knowing that she had been in the house of the Lord. That's how it meant. That's how much it meant. My family ain't an exception. I grew up around all kinds of families just like that. But we are strayed from that. We've strayed from the day of rest, the day set aside for the worship of God, coming together, uniting together as the Lord's church, assembling together to declare His truth and to worship Him. Why doesn't it mean something to us? Why don't it mean as much as it once did? Hadn't He done plenty? I don't know how I could ask Him to ever do any more than He's already done. He's done better for me than I deserve. We ought to want to come to the Lord's house. It ought to feel like the week is the longest thing if we can't get to go. There's people who can't physically come who would love to come to the Lord's house. There's members of the church that aren't able to come now because they've been sick. But I know where they'd be. I know there's spots here where they'd be sitting if they felt like coming to the Lord's house, if they were physically able. Where's the ones that's able to? I know people are concerned. I understand this virus has got people concerned, but I'm concerned about your children's lost souls. I'm concerned about their condition and what they're going to do when they become lost and without God. I'm going to tell you what, I'm concerned about the church when it goes on after these older ones has gone on. These younger ones have got to come on. They've got to take hold now. Now. This has got to be in your heart, not a forced thing. I desire to be glad to rest on this day, to rest on the Lord's day, to come to God's house, to miss it when you can't be there. We need to pray for that desire. But I'm going to tell you what, I can't put it there for you. You're going to have to talk to the Lord about it. This is our effort. I hope and pray that you'll consider these words. Consider these words. I don't know how many people watch these or not. I have no idea. It may be done clicked off of this and I don't know. But I'm going to tell you what, I pray that God convicts me and gets me where I need to be. And if it affects you, He gets you the same so that we can be better servants. Because if the church is in better working order, we're there where we need to be. I'm going to tell you what, He can do great things still in this world. Lost souls be saved, big meetings going on. But we've got to be where we need to be. This is our effort. I appreciate you listening. May God bless you.